So my name is Hana Dhanji. I established a coaching company a few years ago called the Law School Edge, specifically designed to help law students like yourself through the recruitment process. Each month, I hold workshops that are relevant to either something you're going through in the recruitment cycle or a skill development workshop. So if you're on the email list, which you should be as of today, given that you've registered for this event, do make sure you look out for those emails because there's a lot of helpful tips, advice, workshops, announcements, and also materials that I'll send to you on a frequent basis. Okay, so today we're going to be focusing specifically on the OCI interview process, but of course, any of the advice that you learn here today can also be transferred over to the actual in-firm interview. And we'll start with a quick introduction of who I am. So for those of you who don't know me, I was born in London, England, and grew up in Toronto. I did my background at the University of Toronto, my undergraduate degree in psychology. And after that, I decided to pursue a master's in international affairs in Geneva, Switzerland. And I worked for a short period of time at the UN and also at the World Health Organization while I was there. I came back from Switzerland to pursue the JD MBA program at the University of Toronto. So I've been through the whole law school process and then immediately went to go work in New York at Sullivan and Cromwell. So that's a Wall Street firm doing capital markets. I also spent a year in their London office before moving over to work on Middle East transactions at Hogan Lovells in Dubai. I left that to start my coaching practice, which is now the Law School Edge. And so I'm very happy to be here with you all today and come with a lot of lived experience around what you're going through, having been through an OCI process in Toronto as well myself. So today we're going to look at a few things. I want to preface why we are talking about the OCI process with such depth and intention, and that only can be situated in the context of the current legal job market. I think it's very important that you understand kind of what the hiring statistics look like, what firms are typically looking for, and which way the trends are moving. I then want to talk generally about what the hiring process looks like. What happens if you don't land in this recruit? And if you do, what are the implications? Then we're going to go into detail about what the OCI process involves and the strategies you'll want to be mindful of. I'll also talk to you about the importance of brand building and why, if you do not have a clear brand, it doesn't matter how strong your answers are, you will not sufficiently differentiate yourself to be one of the people invited back for the in-firms. I'll also give you some pro tips on how to make yourself sufficiently differentiated, a few key takeaways, and then next steps. I will leave some time at the end of this presentation for Q&A, but if you do have questions that correspond with the topic we're discussing, please make sure to raise your hand and I can address it. So let's start with the legal job market outlook. Okay. In general, there are 12,895 law students at any given point in time enrolled across 23 law schools in Canada. It's 1/10 of the size of the US market, but it's still substantial in terms of numbers. Every year, the applicant pool seeking summer positions in the 2L recruit, if we take 1/3 of that number, is about 3,000 to 4,000 students. Typically, the Toronto and Vancouver market are the two largest legal markets nationwide with full service corporate law firms. And that's a big part of what we're focusing on today. It's not the only part, but those are the biggest markets for corporate hiring. In 2024, the numbers decreased from the previous year. So if we look at Toronto recruitment numbers for the 2L recruit, there were 393 students hired last year compared to 449 the year before. This means that the market has taken a turn, it is tightening, and the recruit is more competitive. This also remains consistent when we look at Vancouver numbers. Only 144 students were hired in the Vancouver 2L recruit for students who practiced at firms this summer. This is compared to 150 who were hired last year. We see the same in Ottawa. 41 students were hired in the Ottawa 2L recruit for summer 2024, and this was down from the previous year. We know in total last year, there were 92 students hired in Ottawa between the IP recruit and the regular recruit. There were only 65 this past summer. 43 students were hired in Calgary for summer 2024 compared to 65. And across all 4 major jurisdictions, we saw about 645 students accept offers across Canada. When we do the numbers and we look at 645 out of, let's say, 3,000 applicants, if we're being more conservative, the total hiring success rate for students applying in the 2024 2L recruit was only 18 to 21%. That means less than 1/5 of students applying actually landed jobs. This was down from the previous year when success rates were about 20 to 25%, which meant on the upper end, 1 in 4 students participating in the 2L recruit would land a job. The key takeaway for you to know is that the market hasn't significantly shifted from 2024, from last year's recruit. What we are expecting are similar numbers, that there's a tighter market and that your success rate, if you're just approaching the recruit without any coaching support, will be about 18 to 21%. That's your likelihood of landing a job. By comparison, and just for your information, clients who worked with me in the 2L recruit enjoyed a 77% success rate in the 2L recruit. That's compared to the 18 to 21%. So what I'm sharing with you today is all the information that I would have given to my clients and the help that you might need to really make your application competitive. So make sure you do watch this recording after if you can, and ask questions during, because this advice makes a dramatic difference in whether you succeed or not. In terms of job market outlook, I also want to turn your attention to the following statistics here. So we mentioned that there were about 3,000 applicants on average each year in the 2L recruit. Last year, we know 650 landed jobs, which was about a 21% success rate. On average, a Canadian law student will sink about $100,000 into their education, or take on that amount of debt, rather. So that includes tuition, books, cost of living, opportunity cost of not working, about $100,000. At a prime interest rate of 6.7 on that debt, your average repayment is about $1,000 a month. And one thing I want to turn your attention to is if you do not land a job in the 2L recruit, the average Canadian law student can expect to earn $57,000 to $60,000 approximately upon graduation. That's your average salary. That's a take home of $3,421. So there's not a lot of money if you have a debt repayment of $1,000 left. If you do land a job, whether it's on Bay Street, in Calgary, in Vancouver, or in one of the major firms, you're looking at between $100,000 and $130,000 as a first-year associate. Your monthly take-home is then $6,500 or $6,568, which makes a $1,000 a month debt repayment a lot more manageable. The reason I'm showing you these numbers is because you have to understand that in order to make the investment that you've already put into law school worth it, you need to land one of these jobs. You need to be amongst that 18 to 21% to be able to even pay off the investment in your education. So all the advice I'm giving you, please take it to heart. I've seen a lot of heartbroken students who did not follow this advice come out and say, I didn't land a job. What am I going to do? How am I going to pay my debts back? I'm giving you the numbers now so that you understand the reality of what you're walking into. For those of you interested in potentially lateraling to New York, a first-year associate in New York earns $330,000 as a first year compared to $130,000 in Canada. And this is in Canadian dollars. The average take home by comparison is $16,500 a month. If you are interested in eventually going over to New York as a first-year associate, please reach out to me and book a call. That is one of the areas of specialty that I have because I was in New York and I've placed a number of students there in the past. If you want to be in Canada, aim for one of the bigger firms so that you're getting enough money at the end of the month to actually pay off the debt. So what are the key implications of this brief overview of the job market? It's important to land a meaningful job in the 2L recruit. Whatever you can do to increase your chances, it's worth doing. Number 2, the 2L law job isn't just about the take-home pay. It's about the fact that if you land a solid position, you will be provided with the best legal training that you can access. And that job in particular will provide a pathway to a full-time role after graduation. You won't have to participate in the articling recruit. Remember that more than 60% of Canadian law students will graduate without proper jobs, and they tend to end up in lower paying roles like document review or legal adjacent roles, whether that's legal technology or compliance, regulatory compliance work, or jobs that aren't as well suited to what they really wanted to do. By watching this presentation and reducing the information asymmetries around what firms are looking for, you will improve your odds of landing the type of job you want at the salary level you want. And some of the big things we'll be talking about today is why branding matters and why it's important to communicate your unique value proposition in the interview process. I know it's only 17 minutes, and we'll get into what the structure of the OCI is, but it can be done effectively if you follow the advice I'm about to give you. So let's take a quick look at the hiring process for those of you who are new to this, okay? 1L we know is done, and that's step one. Typically, you would have wanted to participate in the 1L recruit this past year or land a competitive job on the client side, so that when you're coming into this 2L recruit, you have a track record of strong experience behind you. Right now, you and I are at step two. We are looking at a 2L role at a top firm. If you're able to land a 2L role in step two, you would convert it in step three into an articling position. The articling position is by no means a guarantee of being hired back. So in step four, what you'll need to do is make sure you do exceptionally well during articling so that you are offered a full-time associate position after articles are finished. So really, your entire career path comes down to landing this 2L role. If you don't get it for any reason, after this process, reach out to me and we can look at 2L positions that might come out of the woodwork down the road. So like in December or January, other firms or other in-house positions may become available that we can talk about. Or you may want to set yourself up for articling. There's an articling recruit next year, but the jobs are fewer and there's not as many firms participating. So this is really your best chance at this point of making sure you have a job after graduation. So the 2L pathway to getting hired is very straightforward. I hope that many of you took advantage prior to this stage of networking with firms. It's something you'll want to bring up in your interviews. If you attended open houses, virtual coffee chats, if you attended any kind of networking events, please make a note of which firms you did that with and who you met, and try and reference that in your OCI interview. You would have already at this point applied to any of the firms that you were interested in. There are cities that have recruits after this one. So for example, the Ottawa recruit, the 2L recruit, I believe is a little bit later, and the Halifax one, I believe, is a little bit later. So it's something that you may want to look at. What other cities are still hiring after this formal recruit for Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and some of the other major cities? Are there other ones you could look to as backups? Something to think about. Step three is where we're currently at. We're looking at preparing your OCIs, and that's the topic that we're really focusing on today, including what the process is, what the rules are, what the evaluation criteria is that firms use, and how you can improve your chances of getting the callback interview. We're also going to talk a little bit today about how to prepare something called core stories, develop your brand story, and once again, this concept of the UVP or unique value proposition. The major considerations are the following that I want you to keep in mind as we jump into the OCI details shortly. The 2L recruit is the single largest entry point for law students across top firms in Canada. Firms are increasingly looking to diversify their candidate pool through a robust evaluation process, and these are some of the things they're keeping in mind. Number one, do you have a demonstrated track record of interest in the practice areas you say you're interested in most? Emphasize your diverse background wherever possible, whether that's education, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, culture. It's okay to celebrate some of these aspects of yourself in the interview. Talk about the affinity groups you belong to, or the student law associations you belong to that represent your heritage. Maturity and breadth are also important. So what life experience have you gained along the way that would contribute to you being a mature professional lawyer? If there are professional skills you have developed in a concerted manner, whether they're client-facing skills, leadership, adaptability, project management, commercial savvy, negotiation skills, please make sure to also incorporate that into the brand story we're going to talk about. Academic excellence is not something you have to necessarily articulate verbally. It's something they already know from your transcript. But how you manage to excel will not be obvious to the firm. What did you do to get those good grades? Where is the discipline, level of organization, structure that you used to approach demanding tasks and to succeed? That part should come out. And we will talk about that when we get to behavioral questions. Finally, if you've networked with people at the firm, I'd once again make sure you bring that up. And where possible, firms are really, really enjoying hearing about entrepreneurial skills that students can bring. So make sure that that's also an emphasis. Where have you taken a project in the past owned it, created a process around it, and executed on it, and held strong accountability for making sure it got done. The key I want you all to remember, and I will say this now, I will say it in the middle, and I will say it at the end, is I want you to imagine that candidate selection in the OCI process functions like a bell curve. So if we know that a curve has a tail on one end, the bell in the middle, and a tail on the upper end, the OCI process is not just meant to eliminate all the red flag candidates on this tail. Anyone who sits in the middle and appears fine but not great will also be eliminated. You can't just be mediocre in this process. You can't just be fine. They can't just feel neutral about you. That is the equivalent of a fail. They have to be excited about you. They have to see a strong fit. They have to see that demonstrated track record of interest and genuine commitment to the values of the firm. If you cannot sufficiently differentiate yourself from other candidates and express these points to them in 17 minutes, you will have failed your job, which is to sufficiently prepare to get an in-firm interview. So how do we make that happen in 17 minutes? Well, here we go.